Hi, my name's Linda, and I'm an Iyengar yoga teacher. And one thing I've been noticing is a lot of people, if I ask them to practice something at home, they'll say, well, they don't have a bolster, or they don't have this, they don't have that. So I'm just trying to make it simple for people to have bolsters, and to show that it's not very difficult or expensive to even make one. So I've made a video. The first 9 minutes approximately of the video are about making a pranayama bolster, and then the second part of it is about making a larger bolster that maybe more people use in a regular asana practice. Here we go. It took me one afternoon to make 2 of them, and it wasn't very difficult. And I'm going to start with the pranayama bolster cover. It's going to have 2 layers, one inner layer that's going to hold the stuffing, and then an outer layer that you can take off and you can wash. Yeah? Okay, so I'll just show you what I've got here that I've cut. So this piece of fabric I've cut is actually something I was going to use to make a rain jacket for a grandchild, right? So I'm not using it for that now. What I like about it is that it's pretty sturdy, and I don't think anything's going to leak out once it's sewn. And so this is 14.5 inches by 27. It's a wee bit long. You need the length of it to be long enough to go from just below your waist to above your head. So when you're lying on it, your whole spine and your head are supported. So that's why I've chosen this length. It's pretty standard. It's going to end up being a little bit shorter than that once I do the seams. So I'm going to make it blue on the outside, gray on the inside, and I'm just folding it in half, and I'm going to sew across the top and down one side and leave the end open. So let me do that first. I'm sewing basically a 1/2 inch, a little bit more than a 1/2 inch seam. I guess at about a 5/8 of an inch seam. And I've got my sewing settings just on regular straight stitches right now. Pivot 1 stitch at the corner, and then come down the other side. Okay, so now I've sewn it once, but I think once is not enough. I'm going to sew a second time just beside the seam so that it's doubly strong. Yeah, so just like this. I could trim that seam and make it really tidy, but I think for what this is going to be just fine. And I'll turn it right side out. Okay, and then what to stuff it with. So this was one of the problems I found. It used to be that the yoga bolsters that we had, a couple decades ago I guess, were always stuffed with cotton batting, but it's very difficult to get that now. There's been some reason why they're not selling it any longer, and the polyester filling for the most part is too soft unless you get something really dense. So I've got a couple of ideas. The first idea is kind of radical, and I don't know if it's a good idea or not, I have to say, but I'm going to try it for this one. I've got cedar sawdust, and I'm going to see what happens if I put cedar sawdust in here and make a firm bolster. So that's going to be my first go, okay? I'm just going to step outside to pour the cedar in because I don't want to get it all over my house. So just hold on, I'll be right back. Okay, so here I filled this with some cedar wood chips, some cedar sawdust. And if you look inside there, you can see it, right? So I don't know if this is the greatest filling or not. It's got some advantages. It's heavy. It's going to hold its shape. It smells like a wood cabin. But I don't know over time how it's going to be. So that's going to be something else. However, I'm now going to just seal off the end of it. And I don't want to spill my cedar. So I'm just taking this and I'm going to fold it over a couple times. And I'm going to run the sewing machine along that line. I'm going to pin it too, just so I don't lose my cedar all over my table here. So I mentioned cotton. The cotton used to be what was inside them. And also some bolsters have something called kapok in them, which often used in Thailand, but it's quite expensive to buy it here. And this was just free from the local mill. So now I've just got to sew this over here. It's a little bit awkward, but I'm going to do it. Okay, now that I've got it sewn once, I can sew it a couple more times. It's not quite sealed. And a few lines of stitching in so nothing leaks out. Okay, so I've sewn across the top. It was a little bit awkward because I had this big shape to hold, but I just ran the sewing machine across here a few times so that nothing was going to leak out. And so now I've got my basic bolster, and I'll make a cover for it. Alright, so I'm going to make a cover out of the same fabric, but it's going to have a tie on it so that I can remove it, I can tie it on. So I just need two little pieces of fabric. So these are what, about a foot, that's about a foot long, that piece. I'm going to cut two of them. And this is just some, I guess, ribbon of some sort from the fabric store that was hanging around in my sewing bag. Something sturdy, it'll work. Okay, so now I'm going to do exactly the same thing with the bag, except, of course, I'm going to put the ties on the end. On first. So if my bag is going to be this size, I want the two ties to be able to reach each other. So I'm going to put those at the end. First I'll trim that, sew that end and finish it off so it looks finished. So I'm turning a double seam, folding it over, the end over, so it's about like that, and I'm going to sew right across the whole thing right now. Okay, then I'm going to sew up the sides and the back end. I'm making this a tiny bit bigger than the last one so I can slip it on and off. So I'm making a smaller seam. The two pieces of fabric were basically the same size, just making the seam allowance a little narrower. Okay. I'm going to turn that one right side out. And then I'll sew on a couple of ribbons so I can tie it closed and the inner bolster is not going to slip out. I'm going to put one on either side, so they'll just be... Okay, so this is the size of the sewn cover. And I'm just going to put a little pin on either side so I know where I'm going to sew my binding. So I've got it so they line up. I've just given myself a little marking. And then I'm going to put this ribbon, and I'm just going to sew it inside the edge, the folded edge here. Okay, so here we've got it. It's just a little tie end that I can tie onto the bolster. Let me try it out. Ta-da! Tie it up. And there you've got it, a pranayama pillow. Okay, so now I'm going to make a bolster which is a tubular shape. It's going to have two round ends and then the body that goes around, and there'll be two layers. On the first layer, it's going to be sewn up so you can't get into the stuffing once it's in there. And then the second one is going to have a zipper, and you can close it up and take it off and wash it and so on. So you've got two layers as well. So how did I get the circles? I just took a lunch plate from my cupboard and I've drawn 4 circles on 4 pieces of fabric because I'm going to need 4 of these in the end. So this is my end, my bolster end. So if I've got an 8-inch circle and I'm going to leave a 1/2 inch seam all around it, that's going to give me a 7.5 inch diameter on that circle. So then I just did the math. What's the circumference of a 7.5 inch circle plus a seam line? I cut 25 inches in length to go around this and to compensate for a seam of about, a little bit less than an inch, maybe 3/4 of an inch, something like that. So to do this, I've got this square. It's 25 inches by 27 inches. And on the narrower end, the 25-inch end, on both of them, I'm going to put some basting about 1/2 inch from the edge so that I'll be able to gather the fabric a little bit when I use it. That'll be my first thing. So I'm setting my stitches to be quite wide so I can gather. And we'll do that first. So both ends. I'm going 1/2 inch from the end, and I've got my length on this machine. It's set at 5, so it's quite broad. I'm going to end the line of stitch about, an inch away from the end here, because I want to be able to get to that thread when I want to gather. So that's one. I think I'll do that seam twice just in case the thread breaks, so I'll do another seam just inside that one. So this one's going to be a little bit less, about 1/8 of an inch less from the edge. I'll do the same on the other 25-inch end, on the end facing it. Do it twice. Okay, so that was step one. So it's already kind of gathered the ends, a little more than I needed, but I can release the tension on that very easily. Now I'm going to set my stitch back to a kind of a more normal stitch. On this machine it's between a 2 and a 3 on the dial. I don't know how your machine is measured. Now I'm going to take the long end and I'm going to sew that up. And I'm going to try not to get these little pulling threads caught in it best I can. Okay. Seam of 5/8 of an inch seam. I'm going to go all the way down. Okay. Now this fabric is not going to fray because of the type of fabric it is, but if you're using something that's going to come unraveled at the ends, I would go over the edges with zigzag. But I'm not going to bother to do that right now because I know that with this piece of fabric in particular I don't need to. So now I've got this tube. And I've got to put the tube ends in. So I'm putting the right side to the right side. They're facing inside, and I've got the wrong side of the fabric looking out into the world. And I'm just going to pin that around the circle so that I've got I'm just matching the edge for edge and just going around the circle. Not couture sewing. This is Yoga Bolster sewing. Just quick and easy. So I'm kind of pushing some of that gathering out as I go around because I can see I've gathered it more than I need for the circumference of this circle. And if I let too much of it out, I can always gather it a little bit more because I've still got the ends of those threads that I kept in there. You want to kind of distribute the gathering evenly. As you go around, you may find that it's a little more gathered in some places than the other. It's not really going to hurt, but it's going to look better if it's a little more even. So I'm kind of eyeing it as I go. Get this down. Okay, so I've taken the two circles and I've pinned them to the ends of the tube. One of them I'm going to sew it all the way around. The other one I'm going to sew halfway around so I have somewhere to put the stuffing in, and then I'll close it up afterward. All right? Okay, so I've sewn one end on here and I've sewn it twice. I did find that I had to adjust that seam a little bit because of the gathering, but I think it's pretty straightforward. You're just sewing in a circle, a straight line in a circle, and making an end on the bolster bag. Get all the pins out. Now, when I do the other end, I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm just going to do half of it, so I leave a gap to put the stuffing inside. Okay, so now I've got this bag, and I'm going to turn it right side out. And so I've left half this circle undone, and I'm hoping I've given myself enough room to shove the stuffing inside. There's the bolster end. And here's the other half-formed bolster end. Now before, I'm going to go aside and stuff it, but I've got a couple of different things. I've got an old quilt that is quite an old quilt that's not being used. That's one option for my stuffing. The other is a couple of old pillows that had some fairly dense stuffing in it. It's not as light as the stuff I could see in the shops right now. So I'm opening those up and I'm going to start filling this bolster, and I want to make it really stuffed firmly. So that's going to be my next thing. Okay, so here's some of that old stuffing, and I'm just putting it in the gap at the end of the bolster, and I'm going to try to pile it in there so that it's really compact. I've got quite a bit of it on the floor, and I'm hoping I've got enough. It's lumpy, and I've really jammed a lot of that stuffing inside. And what I like about it, though, is it's very firm. If I lie on it, it's going to give way a little bit, but not very much, so it'll be good for my practice. Now, what I need to do is seal this up. So, because I can't use the sewing machine on this right now, it would be much too awkward, I'm going to sit down and sew this by hand, and I'll show you in a minute how it looks. Okay, so now I've sewn the other end on. It looks a little bit rough, but there we go. So we've got that circle. So half of it I just whip stitched around the end. And so now I've got this. I'll also say the bolster is a little bit lumpy, but not bad. It feels fine when you're on it, and I think it'll sort itself out after a couple of uses. But now I'm going to make the outer bag. So for the outer bag, the fabric, I've cut it 2 inches wider because I'm going to put a zipper in it. And that might be something tricky if you haven't done too much. Now I'm just using recycled things, and as it happens, the only long zipper I have in my world right now is yellow. So what the heck, it's going to be yellow. I'm going to put the zipper in on the edge. Yeah, so it's going to go from end to end like that, and it's going to go here like that. So there are many different ways of putting in a zipper. I'm just going to do something very basic. I'm going to give myself about a 1-inch fold back on the edge. Okay, so I've pinned the fold of my fabric just inside those zipper teeth. I've changed my foot on my machine to a zipper foot, and I'm just going to put that, sew that first side in here. Okay, so now I'm folding this back once again, about 1 inch. I'm going to put a couple pins in it just so that I've... Okay, so I've pinned back this edge, also 1 inch, and then I'm going to come over and sew it up the other side of the zipper. I'm going to cover the teeth, so the teeth are yellow inside, but on the outside it's going to look blue. So I'll just stitch that seam, and I'll show you what's next in a moment. Okay, so just when I'm putting the zipper in the other side, because it's a tube, it's easiest to open the zipper, and then it's easier to sew. So I've got this pinned on this side, it's sewn on this side, and I'll just show you in a minute. Okay, so I'll just try the zip. So there we go. And now I've got a tube, just like I had the tube before, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to put some basting, and then I'm going to zip it up. Ta-da! A bolster. A bolster with a removable casing, with a yellow zipper that is rather colorful. Okay, so anyway, it's free if you ask me, because it's just from stuff that was lying around the house. I didn't go out and purchase anything. I just used things that were already here. Some of them were used. And the cedar bag, it smells like a cabin in the northern woods, if that kind of thing appeals to you.